Welcome back to Self-Tech and the Forgiveness Journey. This is the fourth and final video discussing the 4 stations of forgiveness. Again, my guest is Nicole Zasowski, a marriage and family therapist, writer, and speaker. During this video, we will be discussing the stations called opportunities for compensation and overtly apologizing. These 2 stations are what will be needed if the damaged relationship is to be restored. So welcome again, Nicole, as we complete our discussion of the forgiveness journey. We're wanting now, Nicole, to restore a relationship. Trust has been broken, a violation has taken place, and there is now an attempt to try to reconnect and to make this relationship healthy again. There are 2 more stations that are included in the model that we're talking about today. Guide us through these next 2 and what all is involved with that.
Yeah, so these next 2 would be included in restoration work, as you mentioned. And the reason that's important is they actually do require the participation of the other party or parties. And so these would not be possible with an individual, but this is a team sport, so to speak. And the first station included in this restoration work is giving the opportunity for compensation. And so following a violation, let's take an affair for an example, a marital affair. There needs to be, basically when there's a violation, the safety in the relationship has been drained. And that's one of the unfortunate facts about trust and safety is it can be torn down in a nanosecond,
right,
and it takes a lot of time to build. And so giving the opportunity for compensation is essentially leveling out the ground again. It's a season that follows a violation in which there's not necessarily a balance, but in a good way, the violator has the opportunity to put trust back in a very active and very reliable way into that relationship. And so they're making extra efforts. They're, especially in this season, they're going above and beyond in that balance of give and take to level out the trust in that relationship again.
Yeah, it's not because you did this, you now owe me. This is payback. You know, yeah. You owe me a trip to Europe or that.
No, this is a payment plan. It is not a payback plan. And so you're exactly right. Every deposit in this trust bucket is not revenge oriented. It's very much related to reestablishing and restoring love and trust in the relationship.
Well, who determines that?
Both parties.
Okay.
So this is a joint conversation, usually in a therapeutic setting. So it's a conversation that takes place with a therapist. There's agreement about what this looks like. Often it's written down and even signed by both people just as a ritual of agreement, and we're in this together and we're both on board with this. It requires a high degree of reliability because we as human beings need a really high degree of reliability to feel safe. So we're talking between 88, 93%, around 90% reliability.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Very high. Very high.
Not a whole lot of room for mistakes there.
No, although they will happen.
Yeah.
And this is where both parties have a role. So I think often we think of the misconception in this station is as you're giving opportunity for compensation for the violator to put trust back in, that the person who's been violated is just sort of sitting there judging if it's good enough. That is not their role. Their role is to A, make the efforts of the violator count.
Mm.
Cannot be a bucket with a huge hole in it where every time the violator puts a deposit in, it's just falling right through the bottom.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about this, and this is another one of those technical terms of confirmation bias. They keep looking for evidence that proves that they're not trustworthy instead of looking for evidence that they are.
Yeah.
And so to look for, give them the credit for what they're doing.
Yeah. So that there's actually a bottom of that bucket where trust can accumulate.
Right.
And that has to take place over the course of time. And so it's important that as these small deposits are made, they're being made in a place where their efforts are actually being seen and counted.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard work on the part of the person who has been violated, even though they're not doing the action per se. That is just as active a role as the person who's putting those deposits in. The other role that the violated person has is to be able to make those allowances for that 7 to 10% that is not perfect. So the easiest example I have of this is almost in every situation, total openness when it comes to technology, social media, email,
Right.
text messages. There's like an over degree of openness in sharing. And even when, and not just access to those things, but if, as in the case of an affair, if the violator who had the extramarital affair receives a text that maybe their spouse didn't check or didn't see, that they're actually offering that information. This person texted me, I'm going to show you my response, which is going to look something like,
Right.
I'm showing this to my wife. We are not, or my husband, we are not, you are not to contact me again. So it's not only being willing to have access to it, but I'm going to offer it. Well, there might be once in a blue moon where it happened at work, the workday took off in an absolutely crazy direction. The person's heart would have been to totally share that with their spouse when they got home, and it slipped their mind to do so.
Right.
We are not robots. We are human beings. And so to be able to not see that as a sign that nothing in the bucket counted, and that they're just how they always were,
Right.
is also a really important and difficult role of the person who's been violated. To not just empty that bucket over an innocent mistake that isn't happening very often.
Nicole, do you find it's important to really be clear on what those expectations are to rebuild that trust?
Yeah, as clear and specific as possible, because then you're not spending your energy arguing over whether that was done correctly or not. And it also builds safety to be able to have mutual understanding that this is what I can expect moving forward, and this is what's expected of me moving forward.
Yeah, I was thinking of especially where you might hear somebody say, I'll just know. I'll just know if I can trust you. I'll
Right.
feel it in my gut. My heart will feel safe if that's the case. And kind of leaves the person who's trying to rebuild this trust at a loss and very vulnerable in some regards to how
Yeah,
to rebuild it.
it's a disservice to both parties to not be specific. For the person who's been violated, we need those. If you think about a rock climber, we kind of need those crevices and footholds in order, our heart needs that in order to feel safe, or to just know that they're safe. We need some evidences of that. Also, for the person who has made the violation, they need some specific ways that are actually going to count in filling that trust bucket. And it needs to be agreed upon by both parties.
And I would think that some kind of reinforcement on that it's happening, that they're receiving those validations, or they are doing what they need to do in order to rebuild that trust, would be important.
Yeah, so those are great check-in conversations in therapy. You know, ideally the couple is continuing to see their therapist throughout this period, and we're checking in on what happened or didn't happen this week. What, you know, we're really naming the things that were put into that trust bucket, or things that didn't happen that should have, and making those quick repairs. And this is also where we might need to revisit some other stations. If we keep coming up against the same issue as we're rebuilding trust in the relationship, maybe we might spend some time doing some understanding work again, so that the violated individual is in a space where they can more easily receive these efforts. Or maybe there's something we missed, an insight that's really important to name at this point.
Yeah, I think right here would be maybe a good point to talk about how that even the one who violated, the willingness that they have to go back and to go back to the insight station, or to do some of the other stations, the last one that we're going to talk about in just a second, that it can be going back several times, and their patience, their understanding, doing that just again adds trust to this trust bucket, if you will.
Yeah, even participating in the forgiveness process is a way that they can make a trust deposit, and being willing to do that, and not having this narrative that I checked that box and I'm never going back again,
Yes.
or I already did my duty there. You know, I can revisit that as many times as you want to revisit it.
Yeah.
And in the years to come, you know, when because unfortunately the nature of forgiveness is that there will be landmines in the future, trigger events, or a trigger person that we might encounter that could bring up the pain again, and being willing to say, let's have the conversation again. I'm here for it. I'm with you. I'm present. That is a huge trust deposit when that can happen.
Yeah, you hear a lot of times the violator just say, look, we already dealt with that. It's in the past. I just want to move on.
Right.
And when they approach it in that regard, they actually, if that trust bucket, they actually just punch a hole in it, or they take that trust out by being so impatient or frustrated.
And to your point in a previous session, if we haven't accurately named the violation, and we've assumed that the violation is the harmful action and not the wounds around their identity and sense of safety, then this is probably going to keep coming up, because there's going to be a question of, does the violator really understand the impact of their choice on me? And so that might be one reason why the same conversation continues to come up again, and maybe there needs to be a more specific definition around what that violation was.
I think one of the things that I have found useful, Nicole, in helping the person who violated deal with the continual coming up of the pain from the one who was violated. Did I say that right? The violator, excuse me. What the violator needs to say to the violated, as the violated continues to sometimes get back in their pain and their processing. The violator just doesn't know what to say in that regards, and not to be a rote phrase, but just for the violator to say, I'm sorry that I am causing you to go, or I caused you to go through those feelings. I'm sorry that I've caused this hurt inside of you. Just that form of compassion and patience and understanding can go a long way in the healing process.
Absolutely.
Which kind of guides us into
Yeah.
this next station.
Yes. So the final station is called overt forgiveness. And as I mentioned in the first session, this is what most of us think of when we think of forgiveness.
Sorry, let's just go on.
Right.
Forgive me.
Exactly. When, as you've seen, if you've listened to all these sessions, there's a lot of groundwork usually to getting there. I will say I have had individuals and couples that, and families even, that really want to do this part first and then work through the other stations. If I had to pick, it's usually, again, every situation's different, but I find this usually works best if there's been some work in other stations first. And there's 3 components to this overt forgiveness. So we tend to oversimplify it and think, I'm sorry, I forgive you is the extent of it. But the first component is there has to be an agreement of what the violation is. So this is what we were just talking about. If there's not an agreement on both parties' parts that says, I understand that the action I took put you in a position where you felt worthless, vulnerable, and powerless, or whatever the violations around love and safety might be. If both parties can't agree to that, then it weakens the apology because there's not an agreement on what we're apologizing for. Mm-hmm. Or at best, there's vagueness around what we're apologizing for, and it doesn't serve either party to have confusion about that, because then the violated person says, well, do they really get it? And it creates frustration for the violator, who feels like they're saying they're sorry a million times and they don't know what else to do. And so having this clear delineation, specific wounds around love and safety, and an agreement on what those were, is absolutely essential.
Here's what I did specifically.
Yes. And that ties right into the acknowledgement piece. So the violator says, I understand that when I did A, B, and or C, I put you in a position where you felt 1, 2, and 3, and I am taking responsibility for that.
Again, speaking to that, what I call the heart piece.
Yeah.
What was the violation really? It was the pain.
Yeah.
Caused. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm not going to use any language that sounds like, when you did this, I was in a position where I felt like I needed to do this. That's a nice way of blaming somebody for their pain. I am going to 100% own that the action that I chose to take put you in a position where you felt that way.
Yeah, a lot of people have to really practice putting a period at the end of their statement. I'm sorry I did this and it caused this hurt, period. Right. End conversation.
Yes. And for many listening, you may have even been in faith circles or therapeutic settings where you were encouraged to say, when you did this, I felt this way. And as restoration therapists, we're going to encourage you to not use that first part and just say, I did this and I'm taking responsibility for
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. And then the third component would be the apology. And again, this is apologizing for putting the violated person in a position where they felt those things. And it also includes a promise to, here's how I'm going to do it differently moving forward. Here's what I'm committing to give you a different message from here on out.
There's an assumption that I'm not going to do it again.
Right.
And this is kind of goes right back to, and by doing what you're suggesting right there, here's what's in place that's going to keep me from doing this again. That again is rebuilding that trust that's going to be needed.
Yeah, I am committed to continuing to do those things that give you a message of love and safety. Here's what I am not going to do. Here's what I'm going to do moving forward to protect our relationship. Again, the house has been burned down. We're not rebuilding the same house. We're remodeling it in a way that serves us and protects us moving into the future. And I'm clear on what my role is in doing that. It's a promise to do it differently and getting really specific into what that looks like. In addition to saying, if I could take away the pain of what I caused you, I would. I recognize I'm not empowered to do that. I can't change the past, but if I could, I would.
So, Nicole, what are some terrible ways of asking for forgiveness that you've heard? The one that I always think of is, I'm sorry you took it that way. You know?
Yes, yeah, another really sweet way of blaming somebody, or not taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the first one that comes to my mind as well. That I'm sorry you interpreted it that way, or that you took it that way. I think going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, with just adding all these things about what made it easy for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You've just dropped your responsibility on the other person and not picked it up yourself. And
right.
Because taking responsibility is such a cornerstone of these apologies having any kind of weight, you're going to really weaken your apology if you say, well, when you did this, I felt this way, which I know led me to do this. And, or, weighing it down with, I feel like I've said this a million times, but
yeah,
sorry. Or,
how many more times am I going to have to say this?
Exactly. Or instructing the other person on what they should be doing differently moving forward.
Just
this is about what we're doing differently.
Destroys the whatever benefit of apology there is. Just kind of destroys it.
Yes,
for sure.
Also, as a part of this over apology, I wouldn't call it an essential component, but it can be a really powerful component, is if there's some sort of ritual attached to it. I've had couples write things, specific things on rocks that are meaningful to them. And if it's a positive thing about how they're going to move forward differently, they might keep that rock somewhere special that's visible to both of them. Or if it's something that they're letting go of, they might throw that rock in the water together, as a means of, a marker of, we are no longer going to walk in the way that caused so much pain and hurt in our relationship, and this is how we're moving forward differently. You can get really creative on some rituals that might help you do that, as long as it's significant to the couple or the family. It can be a really powerful addition to this station.
Right. I think this is where couples, especially who have gone through major violations, may say their vows again. They recommit themselves. But
Yeah.
even the smaller violations like this, I mean, we've talked today about what we consider maybe larger violations that take a lot of work to get through, but even the smaller ones, to have some kind of um, ritual could be pretty beneficial. I know for my wife and I, we might just look at each other eyeball to eyeball, make sure by saying, are we good?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
a kiss or a hug,
Right.
or a pat somewhere
Yeah.
that basically says, yeah, we're good. This is resolved. Because not everything has to go through all of this. It can be a real quick process, depending on the depth of the violation.
Exactly. And I know, we tend to get really narrow in what betrayal looks like. I know for me in my practice recently, financial betrayal has been a huge theme, and can look very similar to the process we just described, even though we tend to think of betrayal as being sexual somehow or having an extramarital affair. I think there's lots of ways that love and trust can be violated in our relationship. And being willing to see this forgiveness process as an option for you, even if it's not the most obvious example you have in your mind.
Good. Well, thanks for spending time with me, Nicole. And,
it's my pleasure.
You have a Facebook page or anything that somebody could, if they wanted to contact you?
Yes. So I'm Nicole Zasowski on Facebook. I am probably the best place to connect with me would be my website, which is just NicoleZasowski.com.
You want to spell that for them?
Sure. Z is in zebra, ASOWSKI. So it's NicoleZasowski.com. And I'm just at Nicole Zasowski on Instagram too, which is another place I hang out quite a bit.
Great. Thanks again, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome.
I want to thank again Nicole Zasowski for taking time out to discuss the issues of forgiveness. She and Dr. Terry Hargrave combined to write the textbook, Families and Forgiveness. And this is a great resource for clinicians or for anyone who enjoys an in-depth look into this topic. Nicole and I have another video available where we discuss her book, From Lost to Found. This is a very personal story of how she learned some difficult lessons before she found true freedom. I hope you will join us in that video and also in reading her book. A better self, a better world. Self-tech.